After getting married to my childhood friend who is deaf, we had sex every day. There was no affection. Just all skills. As soon as the 5-year period was up, I planned to terminate the agreement immediately. However, the image of him, with his deaf ears, almost getting hit by a car while buying me rock sugar gourds flashed before my eyes. And I suddenly softened my heart. Until later, when I planned to discuss with him whether we should just continue like this. The teasing voice of his friend came from the corridor. "Bro, are you addicted to pretending to be deaf?" Asher played with his hearing aid, leaned against the wall, and smiled with his lips curled. "Only when I'm deaf can she be herself freely." I was stunned on the other side of the wall. Then, what out? Wouldn't he have heard all those dirty jokes I said in bed? Others all had secret crushes on their childhood friends. Not me. I purely hated him. I hated that he blew up feces and got it on me when we were kids. I hated that he stuck chewing gum in my hair in junior high school. I hated that he skipped self-study in high school and made me take the blame. Other people's childhood friends were more and more considerate. But mine was like the genuine product wasn't available. And they randomly gave me a freebie. The kind that was sticky. In the years I played with him, there was not a single good thing. And the bad things could fill a sack. Fortunately, having fulfilled my abscess, he went abroad right after graduating from high school, allowing me to spend 4 peaceful years in college. Who would have thought that right after graduating from college, I met the person I least wanted to see in my youth again? And there was even more terrifying bad news. My family went bankrupt, and my unreliable father wanted to send me to get married through an arranged marriage. My ears may not be curable, and I'll be half a disabled person in the future. If you don't want to. Asher across the table lowered his head. His straight and noble suit couldn't hide his inferiority complex. He was completely different from his slovenly appearance in his youth. Seeing that I didn't say anything, Asher's pink knuckles were clenched so tightly that they almost turned white, and his eyes were filled with a broken look. "I understand. I'll tell Scarlett's father to terminate the..." Wait a minute. I suddenly came to my senses. Only then did I realize what he had just said. His ears were damaged? I jumped up with a start, strode up to him. And only then did I see the hearing aid under his disheveled hair. "Scarlett, is it fun to humiliate me?" Asher's eyes dimmed, and there was a hint of the familiar gnashing of teeth in his tone. "How did it happen?" Asher was stunned for a moment. "I didn't know how to use the induction cooker when I was studying abroad. And it blew up. You. I'll marry you. I'll marry you." I covered his lips that were about to open again, looked into his pair of dull puppy eyes, and tried my best to hold back my ecstasy. I'd never been able to outscold Asher since I was a child. If I scold him once, his machine gun-like mouth can chatter back 10 times at me. Damn it. Once I take off his hearing aid, I'll scold him to death. "Asher, are you fucking like a dog?" I covered my red, swollen, and painful lips and pushed hard against Asher's strong chest. I didn't move him. Instead, he moved even closer. It hurt so much that I couldn't help but cry out. "Asher! Stop moving. Get off me." Asher paused for a moment, squinted his eyes, and looked at my lip movements. "Wife, having fulfilled my abscess. What are you babbling about? I can't understand." After saying that, he continued, "I really give up. Can you put on your hearing aid?" I reached out to grab the hearing aid on the bedside table. Abid. Warm hand forcefully covered mine, pulled it back, squeezed into my fingers, and pushed it above my head. Asher's hot breath spilled onto my neck. It caused a tingling sensation. I looked up. The man lazily lifted his eyelids. His eyes were deep, and his voice was hoarse. "Wife, you don't need to hear when doing this kind of thing." After reaching an agreement in the restaurant that day, Asher and I immediately went to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get the marriage certificate. However, I was careful. After all, it was just an arranged marriage. And in the final analysis, it was a relationship of mutual utilization. Just helping the family get through the difficulties was enough, right? I couldn't really let myself spend my whole life with this person. I didn't like him. The period was set at 5 years. Asher was pressured by his parents to get married and needed a decent and sensible wife in public. And he was the most suitable person I could choose among the arranged marriage candidates. Each side gets what they need. Once the benefits are exhausted, we part ways. Asher readily agreed and signed the agreement. On the wedding night, when I was lying on the big red wedding bed, I felt a sense of fear. I didn't consider things comprehensively enough. He wanted a wife. And I wanted an arranged marriage. We were getting married. Not playing house. Do we have to do that kind of thing? While thinking randomly, the pattering sound of water in the bathroom gradually stopped. Asher came out naked, wearing only a bath towel around his waist. The heat was thick in the air. His hair wasn't dried. It was wet and draped over his forehead, and the tips of his hair were still dripping water. It ran down his chest and into his V-line. Looking closely, Asher had a standard inverted triangle figure. Broad shoulders. A narrow waist like a male dog's. Before I could look further down, Asher took a step towards me. My heart tightened. Could it be that he was going to? I swallowed hard. Was it going to be so soon? Asher. I don't seem to be prepared. When he walked past me, I suddenly closed my eyes and gripped the corner of the quilt tightly. A gust of wind blew. The expected touch didn't fall on me. The wardrobe beside me was wide open. Asher held a quilt in his arms and smiled at me. I'll sleep next door. Was he disgusted with me? I looked down at myself. Although it wasn't big, this was too insulting. Asher. Do you think I'm small? A rush of anger welled up in my heart, feeling that my self-esteem had been trampled on. Asher didn't look back. What do you mean? It wasn't just me who agreed to this arranged marriage. Do you look down on me? I at least have a seek up. Is it really that small? Hatch. Are you very big then? I ranted furiously. But Asher didn't even look back. He was just one step away from really turning into the next room. I was so angry that my eyes turned red. I jumped up from the bed and pounced on his back. Fulfill our marital obligations with me. Asher looked dazed. And the bath towel around his waist was kicked off by me. At the moment when my thoughts were jolted as I lay on the bed, I realized that it wasn't that he was deliberately provoking me. That guy didn't wear his hearing aid at all. The arranged marriage with Asher was more enjoyable than I imagined. We were old acquaintances after all. Moreover, he had already become the heir of the company when he married me. And he was so busy every day that I couldn't see him during the day. All he left me was peace and a gold card. Asher stood up after finishing the last mouthful of porridge, adjusted his cufflinks, and picked up the documents beside him to go out. I looked up from the bowl of porridge. You've been really busy recently. The clock beside me showed that it was just 8 o'clock in the morning. In the past, after having breakfast with Asher, he would always read the newspaper at home for a while or chat with me for a few words before going out. Asher tugged at his tie and changed his shoes at the door. Our dad has a project that's being pushed urgently recently. And I'm going to keep an eye on the progress. Our dad. When he said that, he usually meant my dad. Counting the time, this was already the 4th year we had spent together. He was still doing his best to work for my dad. I thought of that agreement again and blurted out, our arranged marriage is almost at the end of the agreement period. You don't have to be so diligent in helping him with things. Asher's hand that was opening the door paused. The atmosphere fell into silence. Although our marriage originated from an agreement, the 5 years had passed for real. Saying this now seemed like I was going to kick him away after using him up. I was just about to explain that I didn't mean that. But Asher spoke up in a hurry. I'm too busy recently. Let's talk about it later. Oh, by the way, I'm going on a business trip tonight. If you have anything, contact me on WeChat. Before leaving, I saw him fidgeting with his hearing aid awkwardly. At that moment, my heart felt as if a silver needle had pierced into it, making me feel flustered. He was feeling inferior again. Inferior because of his ear problem. Could he have thought that I was dislike him for being a disabled person just now? At first, I planned to terminate the agreement as soon as the 5-year period was up. But in these 4 years, we got along very harmoniously in all aspects. As long as Asher wasn't on a business trip, we basically had sex every day. On ordinary days when we had nothing to do, Asher would also accompany me to go shopping, go to the amusement park, and go on trips. At first, I didn't see him as my husband. We had been childhood friends for many years after all. We wouldn't feel awkward or uncomfortable staying together, even after being together for a long time. I occasionally couldn't get used to the nights when I couldn't be held by him while sleeping. Like now. I was lying alone on the big, empty bed, looking at the empty message box on my phone. I felt somewhat restless for no reason. He clearly said that we could contact each other on WeChat if there was anything before he left in the morning. It had been 3 hours since I sent the message. And there was no response on the other side. Damn it. Could he have been hit by a car? I shuddered all over and stood up straight on the bed in fright. Last spring festival, Asher and I didn't go back to our parent homes to celebrate the new year. Instead, we made a simple hot pot at home, just the two of us. After eating, we wrapped ourselves in a long scarf and went out for a walk. When I saw the rock sugar gourds on the roadside, I pestered him to buy them for me. Asher then got out of the scarf, wrapped me up tightly again, told me to wait where I was, and went to buy them. It was just across the road. Who would have thought that a car's brakes failed that day? Asher wasn't wearing his hearing aid. He was walking towards me and waving the rock sugar gourds in his hand at me with a smile. If Asher hadn't taken 2 quick steps at the end, I couldn't even imagine the consequences. He didn't realize at all how close the danger was to him, and was still smiling like a fool. He stuffed the rock sugar gourds into my hand, and said that he had bought one of each kind for me so that I could have enough. My dad was too lazy to even buy me rock sugar gourds. And Asher only regretted that he couldn't pick the stars in the sky for me. I don't know if I was scared by the sudden accident that day, or if Asher's smile under the streeteltwide was too beautiful. My heart skipped a beat secretly. Asher is a good person now, although he was a jerk in his youth. Dee, my phone vibrated, pulling me back to my thoughts. Asher, I just finished the meeting. What's wrong? The heart that had been stuck in my throat fell back into my left chest. I suddenly felt that there were some things I should talk to him face to face. When I landed in Yuncheng, it was already the next morning. There were no plane tickets available in the middle of the night, so I caught the nearest high-speed train. After getting off the train, I learned the specific location from Asher's assistant and rushed there without delay. What should I say when I see him later? It seems quite nice to just go on like this. Asher is a good choice for a life partner. We know each other inside out, even though he's deaf. Whether we like each other or not isn't usually that important for families like ours. I actually seem quite willing to live with him. His abdominal muscles are really nice to touch. His face is also nice to knead. And his lips are nice to kiss. Moreover, when I take off his hearing aid, I can scold him without any scruples. Would other men just act like they're deaf when they hear me swear? I think only someone like Asher can meet my requirements. Suddenly, I regret being overly cautious at that time. I don't know if Asher is willing to cancel the agreement and continue living with me. Finally, petting the phone, I summoned up the courage to go upstairs. I took out my phone from my coat and was about to call Asher. A familiar voice came from the back side of the corridor. Bro, are you addicted to pretending to be deaf? What do you mean by pretending to be deaf? I stopped in my tracks and slightly turned my head. And a familiar face came into view. It was Asher's good friend. I had met him before when Asher took me to a cocktail party. Asher had his back to me, playing with the hearing aid he had taken off from his ear. Half of his expression was hidden in the darkness, but his tone was filled with a smile. Only when I pretend to be deaf can she be herself freely. But your ears recovered a few months ago. You can't keep this from her forever, can you? Let's see how it goes. All right, bro. But you'd better tell her as soon as possible. After all, you two are husband and wife. And keeping secrets isn't a good thing. My mind went blank with a loud buzzing. I didn't hear the rest of the conversation. It seemed they were going to a meeting. And the two of them walked side by side. I hid in the fire control room beside them, trying to digest their words. Asher's ears were fine. The reason he kept it from me was that he wanted me to be able to be myself without any constraints. He didn't like wearing his hearing aid at home. I thought he did that because he found it noisy, and taking it off allowed him to focus on his work. Who would have known that his ears had started to recover? I usually went crazy at home, thinking he couldn't hear me. Does that mean he heard me farting loudly in the living room? Even more terrifying is, could it be that he also heard all those dirty jokes I said in bed? When I fled to the airport and was about to go home, Asher suddenly called me. Your assistant told me that you came to look for me? Hiss. I almost forgot that I had contacted his assistant to ask for his location. I stopped in my tracks as I was about to enter the airport and started talking nonsense. I was bored at home and keen here for a trip. What a coincidence. I clenched my phone tightly and stared at my toes. Asher's face involuntarily appeared in my mind again. This was clearly my original intention. But those words I said in bed. He heard them all. Forget it. After all, we're still husband and wife in name. What's wrong with a husband and wife saying some naughty words in the bedroom? Is it against the law? Or will we be taken away in a crackdown on prostitution? I encouraged myself again. After taking a deep breath, I said, I'm at the airport. Come and pick me up. I overestimated my psychological endurance and my nerve. When Asher appeared in front of me, I couldn't help but blush. Are you feeling hot? I looked up and saw that the man was wearing the dark gray suit I had seen in the corridor. His whole demeanor was noble yet casual. It seemed he had rushed here right after the meeting. He took the suitcase from my hand, and his other hand naturally took mine, shielding me on the inside. I'm going back tomorrow. I'll stay here for one night. Will you come home with me tomorrow? He looked at the traffic light and smiled, as if he was in a very good mood. I buried my face in my scarf, and somehow his good mood rubbed off on me. I nodded. Late at night, after taking a shower, I got into Asher's quilt. Sure enough, it's warmer to sleep by Asher's side. I hugged his waist and buried my face deeper into his pectoral muscles. It was the familiar scent of citrus, Asher's natural body fragrance. It smelled really good. Every time I buried myself in his arms, I would sleep more soundly. I couldn't resist hugging him and taking a deeper sniff. I didn't realize at all that the body temperature of the person beside me was gradually rising. When I finally came to my senses, I was already pinned down. The atmosphere was hazy. Our noses were touching. Our slightly rapid breaths mingled together. I once said that Asher was really good at kissing. From my forehead to my eyes, the bridge of my nose, my lips, and collarbone. It was as if there was an electric current, stirring up shivers one after another. Restrained yet longing, I opened my eyes. Already dazed, wanting to get even closer to him. Asher, I want you. Suddenly, I woke up. The leg that was hooked around his waist froze. I suddenly remembered the words he had said to his friend in the corridor. Asher could hear. He could hear me. I looked at the person who was seemingly oblivious and kept going. I bit my lip and forcefully swallowed the words that were still on the tip of my tongue. Damn pretender. He must have enjoyed listening to me all this time. It's just about pretending. Who can't do that? I closed my eyes again, and my tense body relaxed. I kept my mouth shut and didn't make a sound. Asher fumbled around for a while. It seemed he felt something was wrong, but he couldn't reveal that he could hear. So he could only continue. In a trance, he hooked my hand and pressed it against his stomach. The corners of his eyes were wet, making him look like a pure yet wild male fox. I thought of the words I had said before. Honey. You're amazing. Honey. Right here. Honey. When you cry. Enough. I gritted my teeth tightly, holding on to my last bit of resistance. As if he was determined to compete with me. Asher stared at me with his wet eyes, and his movements became even more intense. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I opened my mouth, but the words took a sudden turn. Asher, has your technique gotten worse? I could clearly feel the person on top of me stiffen. He still had to keep going, tilting his face and looking innocent, staring at my mouth and asking me what I was saying. I held back my laughter. I said, you're so bad. Someone was angry, but couldn't say anything. Oh. You're not wearing your hearing aid, so you can't hear me. I really want to try with another man. I've been with you for too long, and there's no sense of freshness left. I kind of like the type of young and cute guy now. The obedient, young, yep, and energetic ones. Asher's face grew darker and darker, and he still pretended not to understand. asking me what I was mumbling about. But before I could say anything else, he buried his head in the crook of my neck. He didn't want to hear it anymore. The little dog didn't like hearing these words. Tonight, the heart of a certain man who had been pretending to be deaf shattered into pieces. When Asher was dressing me while I had my eyes closed, I couldn't help but sigh again that the insecure Asher really exuded a strong sense of being a husband. Wife. Should you wear these black high heels with red soles or these nude ones? Asher knelt down on one knee, waiting for my instructions. He might have really felt insecure when he was deaf. But now? Is he really a poor, fallen dog or a sly wolf? I propped up my chin and looked at him leisurely. Asher blushed and turned his head away. I raised my smooth and fair toes and placed them on his belt, sliding up bit by bit. His chest, thigh, and shoulder. I lifted his chin, looking at his excellent acting skills and the tips of his red ears. I let out a soft laugh. You choose for me. Before he could choose the high heels, the zipper of Asher's pants broke. I'll go change my pants and come back to put on your shoes later. Whoa, that had quite an effect. I shook my head, picked up the pair of nude high heels, and threw them aside. It seemed Asher liked the pair of black high heels with red soles better. Asher. After he led me all the way home from Yancheng, I suddenly remembered the main thing. I remember that when I went there, I seemed to want to talk to him about the agreement. I had forgotten the main thing after having so much fun and coming back. Let's talk about that 5-year prenuptial agreement. I rummaged through the drawer and took out the crumpled agreement. I didn't notice that Asher, who had turned halfway around behind me, turned back again. Asher. There was no response. So I raised my voice. There was still silence. I turned around and saw that his hearing aid was lying blatantly on the table. I didn't know when he had taken it off. I picked up the hearing aid and stuffed it into his ear. Put it on. I have something to tell you. I slapped the agreement on the table but found that Asher was still standing in front of the entrance. He was hanging his suit up and down repeatedly, but couldn't seem to get it right. He could clearly hear me. But when I mentioned the agreement, he deliberately pretended not to hear. Could it be that he also wants to cancel the agreement and continue living with me? I was secretly delighted. But I deliberately wanted to tease him. I suppressed the corners of my mouth that were about to rise and deliberately elongated my tone. The 5 years are almost up, and I feel like we're not really a good match. There was no response. Didn't I just put the hearing aid on for him? I took off my high heels with a huff and rushed in front of Asher, roughly pulling his tie. Keep touching. You're going to make the suit all pill ed if you keep touching like this. Can't you hear me when I'm talking to you? Asher looked blank, pointed at his hearing aid, and said dryly, it seems to be broken. Fine. Keep pretending. I took out my phone, ready to type a message to him. A trace of panic flashed in Asher's eyes. And he grabbed the suit from the rack, put it on, and walked out the door without looking back. I'll go and fix the hearing aid right now. We can talk about things later. Oh. Right. I think there's still a meeting at my company tonight. Don't wait for me to come home. Me? This excuse seemed so familiar. No way. Does he like me that much? It wasn't just tonight. For a whole week, Asher didn't come home. When I sent messages, he just replied with, may. Or oh. When I called and mentioned the key words, he said the signal was bad. Me, I seem to have lost all my strength and means. I'm too lazy to tease him anymore. Because I found that I kind of missed him. I couldn't wait to see him. When I stood downstairs of his company with the thermal bucket, my palms were sweating involuntarily. And they were so slippery that I had to keep switching hands to hold the bucket. I felt inexplicably nervous. I didn't know why. During the 5 years of my marriage to Asher, we were like an ordinary couple. We attended banquets together, traveled abroad together, and celebrated festivals together. But whether it was holding hands tightly or having in-depth conversations, we never said those words of love. We tacitly attributed all these behaviors to a marriage of convenience. No matter who the partner in the marriage of convenience was, they would do these things. Right? I used to think so. Until I found that every day when Asher wasn't by my side, his face would frequently appear in my mind. Asher. Who would shield me on the inner side when we crossed the road? Asher. Who was used to holding me in his arms when we slept? Asher. Who would take the initiative to dress me when I didn't want to get up in winter? Asher. Who would insist on making breakfast for me even though I was used to sleeping in? Unconsciously, Asher had already infiltrated my life. I seemed to feel that life would definitely be different depending on who I was with. Looking at the soup I had cooked in my hand, I suddenly felt uncertain again. I had never been in the kitchen in my entire life. Would it be so bad that Asher would vomit on the spot? It would be better to order a serving from a restaurant. But I was already downstairs. I closed my eyes and steeled myself. Well, if he could drink the soup I cooked, it would be his good fortune. Others don't even have the chance to drink it. I walked to the outside of Asher's office. Just as I was about to push the door open, I heard an argument coming from inside. Are you fucking crazy? Do you know how much our company lost because of that bullshit request Scarlett's father made last time? It was the voice of his partner. That's a bottomless pit. Can't you see what project he asked you to invest in? Are you just going to keep taking the losses like a fool? That's Scarlett's father. Is this what you call loving someone and everything about them? How many times has it been? You tell me yourself. How many times is this? The partner's voice rose several notches. The sound of a glass shattering came from the office. If you insist on investing in this project, I'll withdraw from the partnership and pull out my investment. Just pretend you never had me as a brother. The angry voice echoed through the office building. The door slammed shut with a loud noise. The partner left. Asher was still inside, giving instructions about the project to someone. As if he hadn't heard the previous argument at all. But he had never told me. My father had actually made so many unreasonable requests to him behind my back. The employees passing by around us were still whispering in low voices. They're arguing again. It feels like they're arguing every day. If President Asher keeps going like this, won't our company go bankrupt? This isn't something we low-level workers should worry about. Let's go. Let's not talk about it. Having a boyfriend like President Asher who's head over heels in love. Greedy girl wants everything. I didn't know any of this. I thought that every time I went home and my father greeted me with a smile, it was because my arranged marriage had helped my father's company get through that difficult time. It turned out that it wasn't just that one time. It was every time. Every single time within these 5 years. I actually still had expectations for that blood-sucking father. How ridiculous. There was a commotion from the other side of the corridor. And Asher came out. He saw me. I casually threw the thermos bucket into the trash bin in the stairwell. Wife? Why are you here? Have you eaten? I'll take you to eat. Asher smiled and habitually reached out to hold my hand. I took 2 steps back. His hand missed mine. The smile froze on his face. I mind that you're deaf. Asher. When the agreement ends, we're getting a divorce. You ungrateful wretch. Has Asher been treating you badly? Why are you talking about getting a divorce from him? As soon as I entered the house, a sharp pain shot through my forehead. Immediately after, a thick lid flowed down my face to the corner of my mouth. It smelled terribly fishy. Looking at the broken ashtray beside me, I numbly turned my head and looked at the man in front of me. The man whom I had once tried my best to gain his approval. I didn't understand and asked, Dad, do you still have the slightest bit of love for me? I had never met my mother. The day I was born was the anniversary of her death. Since I could recognize people, I liked to follow behind my father. When I was a child, he wasn't like this. He would buy me toys, lift me up high, and tell me fairy tales. I really thought I had a father who loved me very much. But when did everything start to change? As I entered junior high school, my facial features gradually matured. A friend of my father's said that I was growing more and more like my mother. Since then, the way he looked at me had changed. The blame for my mother's death was placed on me. The money for the late submitted materials. The parent-teacher meetings that no one attended. The absent parent-child activities. It wasn't that our family didn't have money. My father would use the excuse of not having time to fob me off. He was so cruel. So cruel that he only wanted to leave me with a short primary school time. And then he threw me away mercilessly. He didn't say anything. I spoke again. Am I just a commodity that you used to curry favor with in the Vanity Fair of fame and fortune? The person I asked you to marry was Asher. Except for his bad ears. In what other way does he not deserve you? How can you say I treated you like a commodity? As if still not satisfied, he grabbed the water cup on the table and smashed it hard on the ground. I didn't know if he was venting his anger or hiding his guilt. He thought I didn't know his secret plans. Because the first candidate for the arranged marriage was Asher. And he was directly confirmed on the spot. So there were no more subsequent arranged marriage candidates. He had made so many phone calls to various companies. There were 50-year-old pop-drilled uncles. There were young masters in the industry who were ruthless and suffered from hidden diseases. And there were men whose sexual orientation was male but were forced by their parents to have an arranged marriage. Looking at the man in front of me, who had gone from familiar to strange, I laughed until tears welled up at the corners of my eyes. I wanted to expose him several times. I wanted to condemn him with righteous words. I wanted him to bow his head and apologize to me. I wanted to ask him if he knew that I had suffered from depression in college and make him feel sorry for me. But everything I wanted was based on the existence of our father-daughter relationship. It wasn't necessary anymore. I wiped away my tears, took out an agreement from my bag, and slapped it on the table. I'll give you $5 million as the cost for raising me. From now on, we'll sever our father-daughter relationship. When people are down on their luck, even drinking wine can get stuck in their teeth. I threw away the empty wine bottle and staggered forward. Then the heel of my high-heeled shoe got stuck in the sewer grate. I gritted my teeth and pulled for a long time. But it just wouldn't come out. So I just gave up. I leaned backward. And instead of the expected coldness, I fell into an embrace with the scent of citrus. Get up. Didn't I tell you to call me when you were done? It was Asher. His voice was cold. But there was a hint of anger suppressed in it. He was blaming me. His hands were so cold that I couldn't help but rub my face against his hands. The wine tastes terrible. I pouted and complained. The night wind blew. And the alcohol continued to ferment in my brain. With Asher's strong pull on me, I felt dizzy and my stomach was burning. I want to vomit. Asher looked at his suit that was covered in my vomit. And his face turned pale in an instant. I vaguely remembered that he had a cleanliness obsession. Sorry, Asher. I soiled your suit. I reached out to help him clean it. But Asher pulled me away roughly. He quickly took off his suit and threw it into the trash and beside us without hesitation. That suit cost 80. yuan. Meeting his warning gaze. I lowered my voice guiltily. After all, it was me who vomited on it. Stretch out your hand. Asher said coldly and took out a handkerchief to wipe my hands. He wiped each finger very hard. Asher, are you blaming me for soiling your suit? I looked at my tense slender fingers that had all turned as red as little pig's trotters with tearful eyes from the pain. And I couldn't help but burst into tears. It's just that I soiled your suit. Do you have to be so stingy? You don't love me at all. Why did you enter into an arranged marriage with me if you don't love me? Why did you pity me? I struggled hard. It was even harder for Asher to hold me down than to hold down a pig during the spring festival. After a while of struggling, he finally tied me up tightly, and then I quieted down. I looked at him with my red, teary eyes. He put his finger on my forehead, squinted his eyes, and laughed out of anger. I don't love you? You drank a bottle of wine and forgot all the things I babbled at you this afternoon, right? The world in front of me suddenly turned upside down. Asher carried me on his shoulder in an inverted position. And his actions were merciless. I'll teach you a good lesson when we get home. He really did teach me a good lesson. When I woke up, I looked at the neat new pajamas on me and smelled the aroma of the food coming from outside the room. A good husband is indeed a good husband. He's really good at taking care of things. Holding my head that hurt as if it was about to split, I was just about to call out to Asher. The next second, a glass of warm water was pressed against my cheek. I looked up and met Asher's cold eyes. I had a bad feeling. He was angry. We clearly agreed at noon yesterday. Asher rarely gets angry. And when he does, he's extremely difficult to placate. For the sake of my waist, I decided to go all out. I lifted the quilt and got into Asher's arms. I rubbed my face against his chest vigorously. Asher. I was wrong. I bowed my head and admitted my mistake. He couldn't bear to be indifferent to me. I sat up straight and carefully leaned my mouth towards his. A couple of kisses would make things better faster. My pouted lips were blocked by his stiff middle finger. Asher's eyes were sharp, and his tone was beyond doubt. Scarlett. Don't change the subject. Repeat what I said to you at noon yesterday. Sigh. I couldn't escape it. My body went limp, and I flopped back onto the bed. I closed my eyes and recalled word by word. After you've dealt with your father's matter, call me. I'll be waiting for you at the door. Asher's face was expressionless, and you can rely on me. Use me. And even hurt me as much as you like. I closed my eyes tightly, and my voice got smaller and smaller. And Scarlett. I love. I couldn't say it. When it comes to things about love, I always find it hard to speak out. After I told Asher about the divorce at noon yesterday, I planned to turn around and leave. 2 seconds later, the tears were about to fall from my eyes. But Asher, ignoring my objections, directly pulled me into his office, forcefully held my chin, and made me look into his red eyes and say the word divorce again, saying that I looked down on him for being deaf. I'm not an actress. Where do I have such superb acting skills? Asher is too smart. No wonder he's a businessman. After locking me in the office, he quickly checked the surveillance footage of the area where I had been before and found that I had heard every word of his conversation with his partner. Before any misunderstanding could even arise, he forcefully tore off my disguise. It was quite embarrassing. The vulnerability that had been hidden in my heart for so many years was discovered by Asher. But it was also quite lucky. After he saw my true nature, he firmly held my hand. I had once been so eager for my father, who had distanced himself from me, to look back at me. Even if it was out of charity. Even if it was out of pity. But all he left me with was one abandonment after another. Even when I was all alone and helpless, he pushed me into the quagmire and the whirlpool. I have cried. I have complained. I have pleaded. All to no avail. My mental illness makes me keep smiling. Yet my heart is suffering constantly. Scarlett. A voice came through the gap of time. I saw a blinding beam of light, so intense that it made people squint their eyes involuntarily. Yet I still wanted to see where the voice was coming from. The 8-year-old Asher was wearing an Ultraman jumpsuit. He held my hand with a sad face in one hand and held firecrackers in the other, saying he would take me to blow up fish. As a result, he threw the firecrackers into the nearby latrine. We were both covered in excrement. The 15-year-old Asher, with a full-on non-mainstream vibe, fought with others for me. But then he accidentally spat a piece of chewing gum right onto my head, making me cut off the beautiful long hair that I had just grown out. The 18-year-old Asher, wearing a youthful school uniform, looked at me hesitantly before the college entrance examination. Finally, handing Foseld and sigh, he left for a foreign country without saying goodbye. And now, the 30-year-old Asher crossed the gap of time. He was still wearing the butter bear apron that I bought for him. He had just cooked a meal for me. He gently embraced me in his arms, and his tone was as soft as if he was coaxing a child. I love you. Asher asked me to try to rely on him. I didn't understand. He usually dressed me, fed me, and even bathed me. The only thing left is for him to wipe my ass. How else should I rely on him? But he looked up at me from below, with a pair of wet eyes, saying that this wasn't enough. I wanted to refute, but my body went weak, so I could only agree to all his requests. Half a year later, he took me to immigrate abroad, and the focus of his company was also transferred overseas. Actually, I knew that he didn't want me to meet my father. Since we openly declared to sever the relationship, he started spreading rumors outside that I was an ungrateful daughter. He said the most unpleasant things he could. Asher dealt with a lot of it behind my back. But inevitably, having postilled mad Asher, some gossip still reached my ears. So he said, "How about we go and live abroad?" I remembered what he had said again. Rely on him a little more. So I would rely on him a little more. I would leave all the decisions to him. He would make the arrangements. And I would just enjoy. Asher made me believe again that a person's temper is nurtured. After another time together, I thought of that hurdle in my heart again. The thing about him going abroad without a word. He missed a full 4 years of my life. Looking at the man beside me, who was lying there with a satisfied expression and kept rubbing his face against mine. The anger in my heart grew stronger. Wife. Why did you kick me? Asher was lying on the ground in a sprawled position, looking at me with a confused face. Was my performance not good just now? Then let's do it again. Someone was not convinced. Someone wanted to do it one more time. I was really speechless. I pushed Asher's pouting mouth away with my middle finger and said resentfully, "Why did you go abroad without even saying goodbye after the college entrance examination? Why didn't you contact me after you went abroad? For a full 4 years. Except for a greeting from him during festivals. He was so cold on normal days that we couldn't even be called ordinary friends. Have you forgotten what you said in your sophomore year of high school?" Asher's shining eyes dimmed all of a sudden. And he was like a wronged puppy. What did I say? I really can't remember. You said you liked the class monitor and wanted to confess to him after the college entrance examination. Hiss. It seems there was such a thing. I was so engrossed in thinking that I didn't notice the crying tone in the dog's voice beside me. What did the class monitor look like? Do you still have a photo of him? I poked the dog beside me with my elbow. I missed. I poked at the air. I turned my head. Asher was standing to zhang away from me. Naked. He was standing with his arms crossed, facing away from me, heading still wide Sasher. As if he was being punished to stand in the balcony. Something was wrong. Although Asher usually doted on me. When he got jealous. He could even do things like tearing off the roof tiles. I had never thought that someone would step into my small world. Which was as barren as a desert. He didn't forcefully pull me out of that desert. Instead, he calmly sat down beside me. He put the knitted hat on his head onto mine, shielding my eyes from the blinding sunlight. And he took out a shovel from behind him, squinted his eyes, and smiled at me. He asked, "Can I plant flowers here?" I stubbornly said, "You can't grow flowers here." But he didn't believe it and insisted on giving it a try. Trying might lead to disaster. How could flowers bloom in a desert? The flowers had bloomed. I jumped out of bed barefoot. And Asher was so scared that he wanted to hug me without saying a word. Asher. The flowers have bloomed. I took off Asher's hearing aid, stood on tiptoe, and kissed his left ear. Asher. I love you. Whisper sweet nothings into the left ear. This time. We confirmed our feelings for each other. We will never be separated. Asher's side story: 3 months after going abroad. My ears were deafened by an explosion. It's quite funny. I just kind of missed the egg tarts that Scarlett made. I searched for the recipe online and tried to make them. But the induction cooker exploded. The doctor said that if the explosion had been a bit more powerful, my head would have been blown off. I don't know why. But when I heard that, I felt a bit relieved. Fortunately, only my ears were damaged. I still had half my life left. And maybe I could see Scarlett again in the future. Scarlett. Looking at my head that was wrapped tightly in bandages. I felt really sad again. Scarlett likes good-looking guys. Especially those who are as fair and clean as the class monitor. I won't be disfigured. Will I? I might be worrying too much. Scarlett doesn't like me anyway. Whether I'm disfigured or not. She won't care. I didn't expect to meet my high school classmate at an overseas exhibition. Her words were like a thunderclap in my mind. Where's Scarlett? Why didn't she come with you? What do you mean by coming with me? Why would she ask such a question? Seeing my confused face, my classmate, who had been smiling, was taken aback and frowned. Don't you know her feelings for you? Didn't she like the class monitor? I didn't even realize that the end of my words was trembling. What class monitor? She was just imitating Ava's words. Ava and the class monitor already have their second child now. I wanted to ask more questions. But my classmate's phone rang. And she left in a hurry after saying a quick hello. What else was there to ask? Didn't I already understand in my heart? I had never thought that something like missing out on someone due to a misunderstanding would happen to me. I'm usually brave enough to speak, act, and ask questions. But when it came to things about Scarlett, I became a mute. I slapped myself hard. I booked the nearest flight ticket. I called my dad and said, "Dad, it's time for you to step down. I'm coming back to inherit your family property." Before my dad could respond, I hung up the phone directly. Someone who is a mute doesn't deserve true love. I won't miss Scarlett for the second time. The fact that Scarlett became my wife was surprisingly smooth. Her family wanted an arranged marriage. I thought that she wouldn't look at me with my deaf ears now. But to my surprise, she grabbed my ear on the spot. With a hungry wolf slide in her eyes. "I'll marry you. I'll marry you. We got the marriage certificate." I have a wife. My wife wants to sign an agreement with me. Wait. Wait. Why is it an agreement that says we'll get divorced after 5 years? Who? I'm not happy. Not happy. Well, forget it. Anyway, I'm sure I'll find a way to keep her with me after 5 years. Scarlett moved into my house. But I keenly felt that something about her had changed. She would actually get up early to cook for me, match my clothes for me, and even give in to me when we had different opinions. She didn't seem like a wife, but more like a nanny. The sky is falling. Who turned my wife into this? I sent someone to investigate the past 4 years of her life. The moment I got the medical records, my hands couldn't help shaking, and my heart felt as if it was being stabbed with a dagger. Sunshine depression. How could Scarlett have this disease? How could she be depressed? What on earth did she go through during the 4 years that I missed her? After the investigation was done, I didn't dare to look at the results. Scarlett had never voluntarily told me about those things. I wanted to confront her father countless times. And I even wanted to give her father a good beating. But every time I accompanied her home, the look in her eyes when she looked at her father still showed love. It was the call of a daughter who lacked love for her father. I let go of my clenched fists. Reason told me that I couldn't hurt the person that Scarlett loved. I couldn't do anything that would make her sad. I started helping her father with his projects. Whether they were losing money were difficult. As long as her father could treat her with a smile when Scarlett went home and make her a little happier, I would do anything. I would do whatever it took. Fortunately, having fulfilled my obsession, I had the entire pay family business. I could squander it all for her. The moment I found out that my ears were getting better, I was so happy that I jumped up. I couldn't wait to go home and tell Scarlett that her husband wasn't deaf anymore. But the next second, I thought of Scarlett's illness. Over the years, she had actually been much better under my care. She liked to sleep in. She liked to eat heartily. When she was unhappy, she would even pull off my hearing aid and scold me. She was smug, thinking that I didn't know. But I could guess what she was saying just by looking at the shape of her mouth when she was scolding. Even if I read it backward. Well, forget it. I put the hearing aid back on my ear. I was afraid that this cute little thing, who was brave but not that bold, wouldn't dare to scold me. Scarlett is cuter when she can be herself freely. But I didn't expect. She not only scolded people, she also said naughty words in bed. The first time I heard it, I almost couldn't hold back and lost control immediately. The second time I heard it, I pretended not to know and kept going. The third time I heard it, I really enjoyed it and secretly felt elated. I don't know where she learned it from. But it's good that she uses it on me. Later, I found out that she had already known that I was pretending to be deaf. She also said that the way I looked when my face turned almost livid in bed but I didn't dare to say anything was really funny. Funny? I sneered with my lips pursed. Asher across the table was lowering his head. His straight and noble suit couldn't hide his inferiority complex. He didn't look at all like the carefree guy he used to be when he was young. I held her ankle, grabbed her waist, and leaned over her. It is quite funny. Come on. Repeat all the words you said before to me word for word. For every word you miss. We'll do it one more time. Before I started, I lowered my head and kissed her lips. Start now. When I'm rich, I'll be dissolute. When I'm poor, I'll change my ways. When I'm faced with force, I'll yield. When I'm seduced, I'll give in. If you don't beat me, I'll confess. If you beat me, I'll cry. If I'm angry, I'll get mad. If I have money, I'll spend it. If I'm sick, I'll pretend. When I'm hungry, I'll eat. When I'm thirsty, I'll drink. When I'm sleepy, I'll sleep. I won't do any work. I won't endure any hardship. After another quarrel with Scarlett, she somehow said these words that she must have learned from somewhere. Just pouring them out one after another. Me. What she said didn't seem wrong. Asher. I want to eat a small cake, Scarlett ordered me angrily with her hands on her hips. And then she turned around and took a watering can to water the little rosebush she had planted on the balcony. The weather was sunny today. The flower I planted was watering the flower she planted. I had been looking forward to such a day for a long time.